So to talk about that kind of mix of art and science of finding, maintaining, converting clients as a freelancer, as I say, we've asked back our good friend Sarah Duran, and Sarah has many insights from perfecting that kind of technique of building a network, working it, and then maintaining it over time. So let me just tell you a little bit about Sarah. For those of you who don't know, Sarah kindly did one of these webinars on a different topic for us last year, and it was a brilliant success, and a lot of people were delighted and asked us to try and invite Sarah back, which she's kindly agreed to do. So Sarah has built up a very successful freelance project management business, and she provides a range of services through her company, and her company is called Fruition Initiatives, as you can see from the slide there. So Sarah's area of expertise tends to be strategic planning. She does things like executive coaching, project management, program management, and also training for individuals, training for groups. And what we love about Sarah is that she has an absolute passion for the freelance path. She's one of those really supportive people who's willing to share her experience, her knowledge of working solo, and also how to help those people build their own business. And what we also find is that she doesn't sugarcoat things. She talks about the difficult side of doing it, because that's really important, because I think some people entering freelancing think, oh, it's easy peasy, anybody can do this. And we all know that it demands a fair bit of hard work. Earlier this year, Sarah released a brilliant book, which we think should be on every freelancer's, not shelf, but on their desk. It's called Instant Freelancer. Instant Freelancer, the shortest path to work and money in the bank. It's a fairly slim volume because it's full of killer content. There's no waffle. It gets really to the point. It's really, really helpful. And it's relevant whether you're an experienced freelancer or somebody thinking of going freelancer or entering freelancing for the first time. And it covers a range of different topics. And maybe I'll let Sarah talk about that later on.
So the things we're going to cover today are threefold. First, we're going to talk about how to get clients, and I'm going to talk about networking. I hope it's new school networking. I think it's also just like a lot of tried and true strategies that I think work really well and get overlooked nowadays. And then we'll talk about doing a discovery call with a new client. So someone contacts you and they're interested in working with you, or you contact someone else. How do you have that initial conversation to make sure that you're understanding what they need and being able to seamlessly transition that into the perfect proposal? So basically, the second two sections will walk through like a client interview process, which I'll give you like an abbreviated version of that just for time's sake today. And then also abbreviated version of how the client interview process, you're basically asking the exact same questions that's going to populate your proposal that you write afterwards. Okay, so let's talk about getting clients. So I coach a lot of freelancers, and what I often hear is that freelancers are getting a little bit lazy and brainwashed by this narrative of overnight success. So this mostly happens with new freelancers, where they'll come to me and they'll say, okay, like how I want to be a freelancer. How do I get started? How do I start finding clients? And then immediately what they want to do is they want to have a funnel. So they want to have some free content, usually some sort of PDF or some sort of video that people give them their email address for. Once you get your email address, then you're having these like discovery or strategy calls with people where you're giving them free advice for things that you would normally be charging them for. And then at the very bottom of the funnel, you get a super small percentage of those people who are actually going to hire you and pay you what you need in order to do the work for them. And what I have discovered is that funnels have a role and are super important for products-based businesses. So I totally use a funnel strategy when I'm selling my courses or when I'm selling my book, but they're not great for service-based freelancers. So if you're trying to sell the individual services that only you can provide, you're not going to get the best bang for your buck if you're trying to expose yourself to a super broad group of people at the top and then filter them down into paying clients. The other thing that the funnel mentality does is it means that every time you're talking to someone, you're looking at them as if they're a dollar sign. And so you have this mentality where every single person that comes through your funnel, you're only looking at them as a potential client and potential money in the bank. And I think fundamentally, this just leads to not only wasting your time with people who aren't actually going to hire you at the end, but it also leads to not having the highest quality of clients. And so my philosophy is about focusing your time on actual relationships and building those one-on-one relationships with people, whether they become clients or not. So we'll talk through a networking strategy that will help you find clients that you can marry instead of just date, which will make your work more satisfying. And it also helps remove you from this like feast famine mentality of constantly having to hustle, because when you have a bench, a deep bench of really dedicated people, I never remember his name, but there is a marketing, like a marketing guru that talks about you only need 1,000 true fans. So you don't need millions and millions and millions of followers. You just need 1,000 people that really love you. When you're a freelancer, I would say you need like 10 to 20 true fans. You don't need this huge email list of people that you're trying to sell all the time. You just need a dedicated group of people that really value what you do and understand how valuable you are to their business. And so there are 4 strategies for doing this, and it's sort of a chronological order here, but they also loop back on each other. So the first one is, and a lot of this is going to sound like a no-brainer, but again, I find that most freelancers aren't doing this as effectively as they could, and so it's helpful to just like ground yourself back into the basics. So the first thing you're going to do is identify your existing network. And I think when I say networking, I personally hate that term. I hate networking in the way that it's usually done, which at least for me, the way that usually looks is like going to events, talking to strangers, trying to make these like cold call type of relationships with people that you think are going to eventually hire you. When I'm talking about identifying your existing network, I'm talking about reconnecting with people that you actually like, know, and respect. So think of it as just going back to everyone that you've ever worked for or with, or other people in your network, maybe their personal connections, and just having a conversation about what you do. You're not trying to sell them. So I think that's like the most important thing here is you're just having conversations. A lot of times I will frame these conversations as just like picking their brain, or just like, hey, we haven't caught up in a long time. Like, let's just see like where we're at and like have a conversation about how everything's doing. And so as you're doing that, you're rejuvenating your existing network. So sort of starting from the beginning, you're identifying the people that you want to talk to, and then you actually need to have those conversations. As you're having those conversations, like I said, you're not framing it about like, hey, I do this, this, and this. You're not giving them your elevator pitch, although you should have your elevator pitch handy if you need to pull that out while you're having these conversations. But really, you're just having conversations about maybe your business, maybe you're having conversations about their business. You're literally having personal conversations about like what's going on in your lives. So you're building an authentic connection with people. And again, you're not trying to sell them. So what you're trying to do is just like make a human to human relationship. The other way you can do that, if you're thinking about having the highest leverage way to do this, so you start with everyone that you know, especially people that you used to work for. I think you have a built-in amazing network right here in the Indie List community, because I think that the thing that people often don't think of when they're doing this kind of networking is talking to people that do the same thing that you do. So instead of thinking about your colleagues as competitors, think of them as colleagues and as peers. And so having connections with people who do the same thing that you do and things that are adjacent to what you do, which is this one about finding the nodes. So a really good way to think about having a steady stream of ongoing business is to find what I refer to as a node. A node is a person who is adjacent to your work and already knows your audience and has relationships with them. So an example might be if you, let's say you design logos for doctors' offices, like that's your specialty. Instead of approaching individual doctors, you'd want to approach like the head of the Doctors Association or something like that. If you design, let's say you design and create videos and slide decks for, I don't know, entrepreneurs. Instead of approaching individual entrepreneurs who might hire you for a one-off project to do that, find someone who's a node. So maybe someone who runs an association, or maybe someone who does something like I do and actually trains entrepreneurs. And so you want to find the person that your audience goes to for advice. So Peter and Una are also both, I would say, nodes for their entire indie list community. And that's why I'm here, right? Because when people want advice on how to run their business, they're going to go to Peter and Una and ask them for advice. And so if you can find a node, and again, build an authentic relationship with them. Don't just think about them as a dollar sign. That's going to give you a steady stream of referrals as you continue to grow and build your business. And then as you're getting those individual people, you have to build them back into your network. And so once you do this initial work of identifying your network, rejuvenating your network, and possibly doing some quote unquote cold outreach to find some of these nodes, you want to make sure you're keeping up with your network. And that can be, that can look so many different ways. For me, I actually keep like a list. So I have like an email list that I use to market like my courses and things like that too. But when I'm thinking about the like one-on-one client project management work that I do, I don't get any of that work through direct marketing. I get all of it through referrals and repeat work. And so what I'm doing is I have a list of people that I'm constantly keeping up with, whether I am emailing them once a month to like just have a Zoom coffee date or something like that. The other thing that's really good is if you ever come across like a book or an article or something that you think someone else might like, that's a really organic, natural way to reach out to people. So, hey, I saw this and I thought of you. So again, when you're doing this outreach, this is not the same as a funnel strategy where you're sending out like marketing emails to a huge list of people. This is one-on-one like relationship building. And I would say too that like going back to the beginning, cultivate those relationships with people you like. And for me, that always comes before cultivating relationships with people who are potentially going to hire me, because I don't want to work for people that I don't like. And so I think that when you approach it with this strategy, you're really coming to it with an eye towards building a business and working for people that you genuinely enjoy working for. The other thing that I would say is when you're having these like one-on-one conversations, at the end of every single conversation, ask them who else you should be talking to. So that's going to give you like a network effect of every time you have a conversation with someone, you're at least getting them to give you an email introduction to another person. And again, it doesn't have to be who else it might need my services. It's just like who else might be interesting for me to connect with. Another way that you can kind of broach that subject without making it like salesy is if you want to connect directly with someone, ask them for advice about running your business. So a lot of times you're a business owner, even if you're a business of one. And a lot of times you're connecting with other people who run their own business. And so a great way to approach that without making it look like you're directly approaching them to ask for work is to just say, hey, I'm doing this thing, whether you're new or an experienced freelancer, I'd love to just pick your brain about what it's like to like run your business, or some of the problems that you've come across, or like I'm dealing with this specific thing. That's always a great way to be able to reach out to people organically. Okay, before I move on to the next one, I didn't put a question slide in here, but let me pause because I feel like that was a lot of information. and see if there are any questions or thoughts on that piece before I move on to the next piece.
Could I just ask, hi there,
Hi.
when you're rejuvenating your network, so what channels would it be, an email, a LinkedIn, and what sort of messaging would you go out to rejuvenate your network?
That's a great question. So I would say email and LinkedIn, I think, are great options. I would say if you're doing an email, make sure that it's like a one-on-one email. So like some people will send out like a BCC email to like 15 people. You want to make sure that it's super personalized. With your messaging, I think that I would really just frame it as like, let's catch up. Yep. Like, we haven't talked in a while, let's catch up, or maybe use that strategy that I just talked about like maybe you're asking them for advice. I think that kind of depends on the person. On the LinkedIn side, and I don't know, I'd be curious what everyone else thinks, but the LinkedIn messages that I actually respond to and end up scheduling calls with people are literally people who are just like genuinely curious about what I do and are like, hey, like I do something that's sort of similar, let's just chat about it. The LinkedIn messages that I never respond to are the ones where it's like, hey, would you like me to run your LinkedIn campaign? I can get you like 15 qualified leads every month. So I think if you're leading with curiosity, that's always going to get you a better response than if you're leading with like trying to sell someone.
Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Thoughts?
I think what you say, Sarah, in relation to LinkedIn, I mean, we all get those in-mail messages, and it's almost like seeing advertorial on the top of a newspaper article. Most people don't bother reading them, they just press delete.
Yep.
So I think you're right. I mean, LinkedIn, we find LinkedIn a really good tool for keeping in touch with our network and so on, but so using things like in-mail, we use it from time to time, but generally it's, you know, you're better off going the kind of personal message route. Yeah. They tend to get the best response. Yeah. So really just to echo that. Yeah.
Yep. And yeah, and I would say like, again, like if you're starting from the beginning of this process, like literally just make a list and like think about people that you know, that you used to work with, that you know, maybe people that you hope to work with. But I would start with the people you know before I start. I would start like cold emailing or LinkedIn messaging people. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So these next two pieces are the pieces where I'm going to just give like a super high level overview. And again, you'll get all of these slides. And these next two pieces are the part that are covered in depth in my conversation and contract course, if you're interested in that. Okay, so say you have a conversation with someone and they're like, okay, I have this project, I'd like to talk to you about it and see if you'd be interested in doing it. So when you approach a discovery call like this with clients, you have to not let your expertise get in the way. And so a lot of times we are so familiar with the work that we do that this can hinder us in getting the information we need from our clients to A, make sure the project is a good fit, and B, make sure that they understand what the process will look like. So you almost know too much about your work, which can prevent you from asking the right questions when you're having this initial conversation with a client, with a potential client. And this can lead to you being in the place of taking on a project that actually ends up not being a good fit, or your client, well, and or your client being frustrated when your proposal is unclear or the deliverables aren't quite what they were expecting. And so you can't let your expertise cloud your thinking when you're having these conversations. When you're having these initial conversations with clients all the way through the proposal process, you're convincing them of three things. So the first one is that you understand their problem. The second one is that you know how to solve it. And the third one is that you can solve it. And I'm going to give you a glimpse at some of the questions, or just a tiny glimpse at sort of all the questions that I ask a client when I'm having these conversations. But before I do that, I'm curious what kind of information other people ask for when you're having this like initial call or meeting with a client from the very beginning. What kinds of questions do you ask? And you could put it in the chat or just tell us. Great. Pain points. Yes. What they need. Budget's a huge one. Perfect. That's one of my questions. What does success look like for you? Timeline, deadlines. How can I help? Business objectives, targets. Oh, perfect, Una. That's one of the ones that I have on my list too, that I think often gets overlooked, is like, who are the decision makers? What do you need? Budget, turnaround time. Perfect. Okay, so when you're understanding what your client wants, this is where you have to sort of check yourself and make sure that your knowledge and expertise about what you do is not getting in the way. And so the first thing you're going to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, is you're going to hear what your clients want. So hear what they want, which is not always exactly what they say. So you sometimes have to read between the lines. You need to make sure that you're checking your assumptions. So this is where you are deliberately making sure that you are understanding what they are saying and asking for. And then balance with them what's ambitious and what's feasible. So for this first one, I deliberately said hear and not ask. So you're the expert, and your client may have an idea of what they want, but you're the person who's actually going to know what's going to get them across the finish line with what their goals are. And so as you're talking to them, which is like the basis for all of the questions that I have in my interview script, is you are pushing them on what they are saying that they want to get them to actually what their goals might be. The second one is, after each set of questions, you're going to repeat back to them what you heard and reframe it a little bit so that your familiarity with the work isn't filling in the blanks for you. And the last one is, you're going to need to balance balance what's ambitious and what's feasible. And so part of being an entrepreneur is taking risks and trying new things. I take on as a project manager, I take on projects a lot types of projects I've never done before, because I have like a replicable set of tactics and strategies that I use to manage a project that I can apply to almost anything. That also means that I'm always able to deliver on my promises and never miss deadlines. And so if you're promising your client something that you can't ultimately deliver on, then that promise never mattered in the first place. So you have to be super careful in the beginning about being honest with them about what you think is feasible within their goals, timeline, and budget. I can't tell you how many freelancers I work with where, and this has totally happened to me too, is you get into this mode where you just want to say yes to everything that they want. And that leads to having a scope of work that is actually not possible. And so what I developed is this set of what I call pre-contract questions. And so there's these 6 sections. Each section has a set of questions that go with it. I'll show you one of them in a second. And having this list of questions, do I use all of these questions for every single conversation I have? No. But having this list of questions in front of me helps me think really intentionally about what I'm going to ask them, and not just get caught up in maybe thinking that they know what they need when they actually don't, or letting my expertise get in the way of really hearing what is going to help them reach their goals. So a quick note about timing on this. This is like a super comprehensive list of questions. It includes everything from goals to budget to who am I going to be working with? How are we going to work together? All of those things. depending on the type of work that you do and the way these conversations end up happening, you may not have like one meeting where you go through all of these questions. Often you'll have like an initial conversation, you might send them a proposal, you might go back and forth on that proposal, and get eventually to a place where you have a signed contract. And so having this comprehensive list of questions will give you all of the pieces that you need to make sure that you have by the end, but you may not ask all of these questions in one sitting right at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to show you just one of the sections of the questions. And then, like I said, all the rest of them will be in the slide deck that you guys will get afterwards. So I like to always start off with, and I think people already had like a lot of these questions in the chat. What do you want to accomplish? This is the core of what you're asking them, right? And what they want to get out of their engagement with you. For each of the questions, I also have a few follow-up questions that will help you like continue to probe. So how do you know that this is a problem? What led you to the creation of ... Like if they want you to actually make some sort of deliverable. The second one is why. So a lot of times people will think they know what they want. This goes back to hearing what they need. And if you're asked them why, they can't actually connect it back to their overall business strategy or the broader goals of their company. And so asking them why whatever you're about to do for them is important is key. And a follow-up question for this one is like, what else? Like, what other motivating factors might there be? I would venture to guess that I am always surprised by how many people can't answer this question. So they can tell you what they want to do, but when you ask them why, a lot of people struggle. And then this last one is, how will you know we were successful? And for this one, I want you to focus on quality, not quantity. So a lot of people will throw out numbers. We want 10,000 Facebook followers. We want 6 slide decks. We want whatever it is. Ask them more about what it looks and feels like if you meet their goals. So like, how are you going to know that this slide deck was what you actually needed? Are there other metrics that we might consider, and who defined these metrics? So you may also find that the person you're having these initial conversations with is not always the decision maker. And there will be a set of questions about this later on. I think Una, you said it in the chat too. Having an explicit conversation about like, who is involved on your end, who set these goals, who am I going to be communicating with, is always a really important one too. Okay, so that's, again, there's a whole set of those questions, but that's just one of them. Before I move on to the third and final part, I want to pause and see if there are any like questions or thoughts about this just like initial client conversation. And if not, that's totally fine. I can keep going. Tips on helping clients. Oh, well, Una, I think having those follow-up questions is what I would get them to, like, A, the follow-up questions that I have listed there, and B, like, why is always the best question. And you can ask why like a million times over and over again. So those would be my 2 tips for getting them to articulate your goals. You could also ask them to like tell you how, I think, and someone said this farther up in the chat, how did this connect back to your like overarching like strategic plan or something like that. Claudine, I think yes. And you could also think about sending these, you could, if someone has like if you have like an intake form that you have clients fill out, maybe not all of the questions, but you could definitely pick a subset of questions that you could send ahead of time. Oh, Jason, that's such a good question. So how much time is acceptable to commit to pitching before walking away? That is a totally subjective answer, I would say, like based on the type of project, the budget. Like I would also say like back to the relationship piece, like how much you actually want to work with that person. So I always think about both in pricing and like how much time I'm willing to spend with someone without them paying me, is almost directly correlated to how much I like them, and like a pain and suffering factor. And so I would say if it's a project in a project that you want to work on and a person that you want to work with, I would commit more time than probably I would if that wasn't true. Okay, so pricing negotiations. Let me hold on to that one, Peter, because I'm going to talk about pricing in the next section. Oh, Barbara, that's such a good question. I saw this quote recently that said, people want to hire rock stars, but they only want to pay for backup singers. And it is so true. I mean, I think you have to, and like I said, there's a whole set of questions that are also like doing these questions also help you build your credibility with them. I think that a lot of people aren't used to having a conversation with a freelancer and going through this like super in-depth like discovery call process. So I think doing this from the beginning automatically like sets up your credibility and builds the case of why you're worth what you're worth. But I will also talk in the next section a little bit more about like pricing and how to do that. So that might address that. But I mean, like that also goes back to the ambitious and feasible. Like, I think you just have to be honest with them about like what they want and what's actually possible in the budget and the time frame that they have. Okay, I'm going to keep this going. Let me get us through this last section and then we'll have some more time for questions at the end too. Okay, so the third part is about the proposal. And again, I'm going to go over this at a super high level. And there's more detail. You guys will get the slide deck. And if you want more detail about this, you can check out my course too. So writing a good proposal is an art and a science. And the formula that I use for this is the same formula that we looked at the beginning. You're going to want to balance all of these things when you're thinking about how you want, like the types of clients that you want to engage in. And you're going to want to balance all of these things when you're thinking about their goals and how you're going to accomplish them. So the sections of the proposal that I usually include are an overview section, the scope and deliverables, and then budget and billing. I'm not going to walk you through these first two sections just for the sake of time, but we are going to talk about budget because I think, as we saw in the chat, that's like a big piece. I will say that the set of questions that I use, basically, as I'm asking them these questions, I'm literally filling in the blanks of these first two sections. So in the overview section, I'm literally reiterating back to them everything they said to me about their goals, about what success looks like, about how what they want to get out of this. And same thing for scope and deliverables. So everything that you're asking them, you're basically taking that, you're writing it down, you're putting it right back to them in the proposal. So A, it makes your proposal super easy to write, and B, it makes them feel heard. So they know that you listened when you had that discovery call with them because you're literally telling them back everything that they said. So let's talk about budget and billing for a second. So we could do a whole course on just this, a whole workshop on just this. But ultimately, I think anyone that works for themselves knows that when it comes to asking for money, it's tricky. You don't want to seem entitled. You don't want to lose out to someone else who asks for less. You don't really want to have that conversation about money in the first place. Ultimately, the truth is that money is a form of power. And when you're settling for less than you deserve, you're giving some of that power away. And so when you're a business owner, you're always striking this balance between being fair, being competitive in the market, and getting paid top rates for your expertise. And there are kind of like three things that I think about when I'm talking to people about pricing and worth. The first one is being competitive. So this actually goes back to the beginning when you're having conversations with people that do the same thing you do. Ask them what they charge. So the only way you're going to know how to price yourself is to see how other people are pricing themselves. And there's going to be a range. You can also have conversations with people that hire people like you. Like maybe you have a colleague or a friend, you know, that that does that. Ask them, like, what would you be willing to pay for something like this? I would not have that same type of conversation with someone that you're thinking about hiring you. But when you're doing this kind of networking conversations, you're also doing some market research about what are people willing to pay for the types of services that you offer. And you want to be, when I say competitive, you want to be in line or slightly above the baseline. So a lot of people think that if you price yourself lower, you're going to be able to get more clients. I actually find that when people price themselves lower, it means that whoever's about to hire them thinks that they don't know what they're doing. So you want to be in line with your peers or slightly above them, because you don't want to raise any doubts about your expertise by pricing yourself drastically lower than everyone else. You also want to play the long game. So engaging with a new freelancer can be scary for an employer, especially if they're not used to working with freelancers. And so if this is where the subjectivity comes in a little bit. If you are talking with a client who you think might be a long-term prospect, and someone that's going to give you repeat work, and someone that you genuinely are going to like working with, you might offer them a slightly lower rate for a trial period. So like, let's do 30 days and like see how it goes. And then just make sure that within your scope or your contract or whatever you end up negotiating with them, that your rate increase is built in. So if you're going to do a trial period, just make sure that you follow up on the increase. And the last one I would say is that for ladies in particular, you need to make sure that you're pricing yourself competitively. So recent research, I think within the last few months came out showing that women, female freelancers are getting paid on average 48% less than their male peers. And so this is just my personal PSA to every female freelancer out there. Do that research. The research and finding out what everyone makes, especially your male counterparts, is what is going to give you the information you need to ask for what you deserve when you're having those pricing conversations with a potential employer. If you know what you're worth and you can back it up with information and data, then you're able to come back and ask for it. And you're able to walk away if they're not going to give it to you. I'll also, Peter and Una, I can send you a link. The statistic that I got here, and it probably is a US statistics, but hopefully it's still helpful. It actually breaks it down by every category of freelancer. And so it's a really good resource too, if you need to make your case for how much you should be charging for what you do. Okay, I am going to go through these two real quick, and then we can do questions at the end. So two other things that I think about when I'm doing pricing. I think about my pricing is a little bit flexible depending on how I'm engaging with a client. So if I'm doing a super short-term project that's like a one-off, I'm going to be charging them my highest rate. If I'm doing a long-term project, and again, if they're going to be guaranteeing me repeat work, I'm going to be asking them, I'm going to be giving them sort of a discount, like a bulk discount. And then the final consideration that I always get questions about for pricing is an hourly versus a flat rate. This is going to be super specific to what you do and the types of projects that you work on. So different types of freelancers are going to think about this differently. In general, I think about hourly when I'm doing new types of projects. So it's something I haven't done before. I don't know how much time it's going to take. I haven't worked with that person before. Or the beginning of long-term work. So if someone's going to engage me in a retainer, maybe we'll do that first month or two as hourly just to like see how much time I think it's going to take.